Hello, my name is Dr. Susan Mitchell, and we're so glad that you joined us tonight for this very important topic. I have my good friend and colleague, Dr. Amyas Kabir, with me here today. And I thought first, well, obviously we're just here to have a conversation about vaccines. And I thought first we'd kind of discuss our credentials or even why we're so passionate about this topic.
Absolutely.
So you want to go ahead and go first?
Absolutely. Well, I've been in practice for about 18 years now. I see a lot of families, obviously including mom, dads, and children. And my passion, Doc, is obviously helping to inform parents about their choices when it comes to vaccines, but also helping to promote general health and well-being among the families, keeping the kids healthy. And I'm sure we'll talk about this here in the course of our conversation is, I'm seeing a lot more kids with recurrent ear infections, respiratory problems, asthma, allergies, skin problems. And it's something that I've seen really more prevalent, I'm sure you have too, in practice. Just over the last 18 years, I see more kids are more chronically ill. And so my passion is just to help educate the parents and keep the kids healthier despite this growing trend.
Absolutely, and that's exactly where I'm at. I've also been in practice 18 years, been researching vaccines for nearly 20 years, and it's just exactly where you're at. Along with everything you mentioned, we're also seeing so many learning disabilities, and in all of the workshops that I've done over the years about vaccines, nearly every month, a mom sitting in the back of the room crying because her child was injured by a vaccine and she had no idea of the information that we're about to share tonight, and that's just not okay with me. Vaccines absolutely should be a choice, and I just want parents to be able to make an informed choice, and that's really why I do this every month and why I want to continue to do it.
Yes.
Get a little excited about it.
I totally agree.
Yes. So, you ready to just kind of dive in?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, where we normally go is talking about myths, and because there is so much misinformation out there. And so the first one that I think is important for us to discuss is that many parents will tell me, patients in the community, etc., people will say, well, yes, I'm scared to death about vaccines, but I don't have a choice. So why learn more about it if I don't have a choice? And of course, you and I know that there is a choice. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Right. I mean, there is, if you go to nvic.org, they've compiled a lot of information, and you can access information about what your rights are as a parent. And it will go, obviously, depending upon what state you reside in, there's different exemptions, different laws. I think one of the things that is concerning to both of us now is the recent introduction of a bill, SB 1410,
right,
in Illinois, that is postulating taking away parental rights and taking away rights to exemption from vaccines. And so I'm very concerned about that.
Absolutely. And that's happening in most states. So for those of you who are on tonight that are from other states, know you need to research this. You need to find out if there's a bill being passed or trying to be passed in your state that's going to greatly restrict any exemptions that you have. Some states are very easy, some are more difficult. So there is a map on nvic.org, and as Dr. Kabir mentioned, and it will be changing. They will be keeping us updated, so absolutely become part of that.
And if you have to, there's places in northern Canada I think you could move to.
Well,
it might be a little chillier.
For real, I am, and I don't like the cold. You know how I feel about the cold. But for real, I will, if it ever comes down to forced vaccination, I will be moving. We'll all move together, all of us, right? So yes, but this is the time. I'm not a super political person, but this is the time for our voices to be heard, to be educated on the topic. We were discussing earlier that there's 300 more vaccines coming or that are being manufactured right now, and they're actually starting an adult schedule. And so a lot of the parents or just general public that are saying, yes, we should force vaccination, they don't understand what's coming down the pike. And even if you agree with what's going on now, the current schedule, which we'll discuss, it should absolutely be a choice for every family. So we've got to fight for that. That's just bottom line.
And I think it's about, I know our goal is to help encourage and empower parents and just individuals to ask appropriate questions. The questions that I ask of myself is, if they're coming up with multiple vaccines, new vaccines every year for new chronic or new diseases as they call them, where, number one, how is that arising?
Right.
How is it arising? Why are there obviously all these new diseases? And we've seen a trend in our practices of kids and adults that they're not coming in with infectious disease.
Mm-hmm.
They're not coming in with acute illness.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of them are coming in with chronic, long-standing illnesses like asthma, attention deficit, behavioral issues. And we can see that shift in trend.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. It's that we're trading those acute illnesses that last a few days to a week for lifetime,
Right.
debilitating illnesses. And that's really what is heartbreaking for me, is that I've had so many kids come in over the years that we're seeing them and the damage is too great. You know, we can't ever really get them back to fully being normal, functioning children again. And they started that way. You know, many of the parents that I'm talking to are saying, I had a normal developing child up until 2 months, 6 months, 2 years, and shortly after the vaccine, whether it be that night or 2 days later, their child's gone. Whether it be physically gone from a death or emotionally gone, where they no longer say mommy, they no longer want to be touched or hugged, and that again is just not okay with me.
Sure,
So
it's absolutely devastating.
yes, absolutely.
I think one of the things that that people need to understand is that we've gone from, they claim that they're science-based and evidence-based, but really is it science or is it fear?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, for sure in the media right now, right? Like the amount of fear and the information that's being put in the media is ridiculous, and it's not the truth. You know, they're saying these deadly diseases are coming back,
Right.
and you look at my latest number I saw last night on the CDC website was there's 173 cases of measles this year so far, and there's been no deaths. You
Right.
know that if there had been one single death, it would have been on the news, and there hasn't been any deaths from the measles this year from these cases that we were discussing here in America, and it's also gets my blood boiling a little bit when they say, well, it's highly contagious. It's like, well, if it's reached 173 people out of the millions of people in America, is it really contagious? I mean,
Right,
it's
exactly.
really not. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a whole lot, you know, which people will say, well, that's because everyone's vaccinated. Well, there's a whole lot more unvaccinated children than 173 in our
Right.
country. So it's not highly contagious, and it's not a deadly disease, and,
Right.
and that's something that we can speak to as well.
Well, and you know, speaking to on the World Health Organization, on their website, you can find great information. Yes, they'll claim that there's 145,000 deaths, I think in 2013, worldwide from the measles.
Mhm.
Well, if you continue to read into the article, it then says over 95% of those deaths are in impoverished countries, poor sanitation, poor hygiene, or countries that have had recent either recent disasters or something that's occurred that has caused a sudden reduction in areas hygiene and sanitation, and has changed things. So if you look at those numbers and you break it down, Doc, then yeah, I mean the death rate even all year globally is pretty small.
Absolutely. You think about that percentage, and I don't know how many people we have on this planet, but that's a pretty small percentage.
It is,
right?
it is.
It's ridiculous. So again, to say that they're deadly diseases, you know,
Right.
there was a thing, and it was on Facebook, and they showed the Brady Bunch, an old episode of the Brady Bunch, and
I'm old enough to remember.
yes, me too. Me too.
By
I
the way.
remember the episode, yes, and but it's something that I hadn't thought of, and there was actually 3 or 4 different shows. And they showed, you know, one by one, each child came home and had a little dot and had the measles, and it was no big deal. They called the doctor, yes, confirmed measles, and no intervention needed. You know, there was no lining them to the hospital. It was not a big deal. In fact, they were all sitting around playing board games. It's not like they were even laying down not feeling well. And so the information we're given, it's so fear-based, as you said earlier, and it's just simply not the truth. So
Right.
that's what we need to look at, is stop getting caught up in the media, which, quite honestly, dare I say, is funded by pharmaceutical companies.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, they have the commercials that's millions of dollars, and so we're not going to get the truth through our media. We need to research it ourselves.
And which is another problematic area, because most of the quote evidence that they claim to be scientific and evidence-based research comes from the scientists whose paycheck comes from the pharmaceutical company who's trying to pass a vaccine or a drug. So that's highly problematic, and independent research is scarce. And the independent research that does come out showing that vaccines may induce harm or anything that's, quote, anti-vaccine, they'll squash pretty quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah, that never makes headlines, for sure.
No, absolutely.
And we see that, for those of us that are searching the internet constantly, we'll see articles pop up in the news, and literally I print them off on my computer, just, to have that hard copy, because within 24 hours normally that stuff is no longer available. Like, you cannot find it. So it's interesting. So, that is the thing, is that one thing I wanted to mention too that you and I have talked about is that patients will also say, or people in the community will say, yes, I'm afraid of vaccines, but they saved us from so many deadly diseases. And again, we've discussed they're not deadly, etc. But there are graphs that I have, and we can make them available to everyone, that show that these deadly diseases had already sharply declined before the vaccines even showed up. So that's where you're speaking to the personal hygiene. So we changed our hygiene. We no longer, it was just sharply declined. So the numbers are there. So we just have to look at that.
Right. And maybe this is, obviously for a completely separate webinar discussion, but obviously dietary conditions have changed tremendously, right? Our kids they're eating more refined and processed foods. They're eating more just sugar.
Yes.
We've steered away from natural whole-based foods. We're eating a lot more genetically modified foods, and even babies genetically modified formulas and things like that. And we just don't know the impact that has on a developing and maturing immune system.
Absolutely.
And you can probably speak to the reduction in breastfeeding.
Absolutely. And that is so huge. I love, there's a great documentary about vaccines that go over pros and cons, and it's called The Greater Good. I know you've seen it. And I love how they say that it's not, our kids today are living in a toxic soup. And that's the truth. I don't believe that, I know a family that their son has autism, and he was never vaccinated. And so it's not just vaccines, but he had high doses of antibiotics, and that's what damaged his body. And so it's not just the vaccines, but it's certainly, they're a huge contributor to the toxicity of our children. And so absolutely getting back to the basics, and we can discuss that even further, of what parents can do to protect their child's immune system. Whether they choose to vaccinate or not, they've got to have that good nutrition. They've got to, get back to the basics. I love, this always makes guys uncomfortable when I talk about it in workshops, but it's so important that I always want to share it, is that as women, breastfeeding women, we have, this, but so I'm looking at you as I'm telling you, but this is for the audience here, this, but as women, we have receptors on our breasts that pick up what our child needs from their breath. So if they're fighting something, our milk will actually change to exactly what that child needs. And I think that's just amazing, and speaks to how we really need to trust and support the design of our bodies. Like, we're designed to heal. We could talk about this for 3 hours.
Yes.
Probably we have, actually. But really getting back to those basics and supporting that part of the immune system, instead of thinking that more health can come through a needle, and it's certainly full of some of the toxins that we can talk about.
And I want to get back to something you said, because, this whole, obviously, as we speak now, was it 2 months or 3 months ago, there was a measles outbreak in Disneyland. And, you can go back to incidences prior to that. There was one outbreak in New York that was confirmed was actually spread by a vaccinated individual. And so some of the science behind that is pretty simple, right? Kids shed viruses. So, 4 to 6 weeks after a vaccination, they're actually more contagious and more likely to spread illnesses and shed the virus than anyone else. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, as a parent who has children that are not vaccinated, and certainly I am part of a big community, it's very frustrating for it to be in the media, and it's been on several different talk shows. I think Jimmy Kimmel was speaking to it, which was ridiculous, and several. And, saying that our children are putting our country at risk is absurd. that's the only word I know. I have other words, but I'll keep those to myself. But in that, it's, you know, just because a child has not been injected with viri, bacteria, chemicals, that does not automatically make them a carrier of measles. And exactly right in that it's actually the vaccinated child who is the carrier. So they're not expressing it. They may not have red dots. They might not have the whooping cough, but it's been proven that they are carriers for that. So it's actually, they're much more at risk than the children that are not vaccinated. So it's just, again, one of those things that's all over the media that's not true.
Right.
It's just that simple.
Yeah, and you know, there's just a lot of contradiction, right? I mean, they'll tell you, well, you know, formaldehyde is listed as a known carcinogen.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question.
Yes.
Go to CDC, they say, yep, formaldehyde, absolutely known toxic agent, known carcinogen. But then they'll go, but it's safe in the vaccine.
Right.
Because it's small amounts.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, I mean, that leads us to all the other things that are in vaccines that are claimed to be safe, but yet haven't been proven to be safe.
Absolutely. And how, you know, there's so many points to that of if a child was having one injection with this small amount of formaldehyde, then maybe it would be safe. But we're getting so many vaccines today and so many chemicals. So we've got all the antigens, we've got all the chemicals from formaldehyde. Many parents don't know that the viri or bacteria are grown on monkey kidney cells or aborted fetus cells. And so it's just the things that are being injected into our children. You know, oftentimes I'll mention that parents that are conscious, you know, they read labels, right? Like we always hear, never feed your child something, like if you're reading an ingredient list and you can't pronounce it, then don't feed it to your child. Right. And why wouldn't that be the case with what you're injecting into your children? But many parents don't know what's in a vaccine, and even their own pediatricians, you know, the parents that are educated that I've spoke with that go and talk to their pediatricians, the pediatricians have no idea. And so we can't just trust, you know, we have to do our own research, and knowing the number of chemicals that are being injected. You know, one parent brought her baby in to get adjusted the other day, 6 months old, 5 shots that day.
Wow.
In nature, when do you come in contact with that many viri, that many chemicals? You don't. And so that, in my opinion, that child's immune system, that child's body was completely assaulted. And again, and we don't know, there's been no studies to show what does that do to our body. And so really, our kids are being experimented on as we speak. And as we talked earlier, we've seen in our practice over the 18 years, we're not doing so hot.
Right, and you bring up a good point. You know, I think I mentioned to you, I'm not sure how many vaccines I received when I was a kid. I'm going to guess maybe, I was born in 1967.
He's older than me.
I am. So I'm going to assume, you know, I'd received polio, DTP, probably 5, 6, maybe 8. All right, I'm thinking at the most. And so what are the numbers now?
Right. It depends on, you can go to CDC for the actual recommended schedule, but 49 doses of 14 vaccines by age 6. I've read even up to 101. There's 101 vaccines available. So it's a matter of whether you're talking about what's available or what's recommended or mandatory, which, as we talked about, is not really a true statement. But yeah, it's a lot. You know, that's one thing I hear a lot is parents will say, well, I had my vaccines and I'm fine, my kids will be fine too, not recognizing that they've nearly tripled the amount. And again, more is coming. You know, they're going to adding, where it used to be up to age 6, now they're adding boosters for junior high kids, and of course the Gardasil shot, which again could be another whole.
Right, I'm glad you mentioned that, because, you know, I have an 11-year-old daughter, right? And so that they recommend it, I believe they're recommending it after age 9 or 10 in boys and girls.
Yes.
Right?
Crazy.
And for that specific vaccine, it's interesting because there's over 100 strains of human papillomavirus.
Yes.
Only 2 or 3 known to cause cancer. And so there's not even a well-known mechanism by which they can say, oh yeah, vaccine absolutely can prevent cancer. But I was driving back from Chicago a couple of days ago, and there was a big billboard that said, get your Gardasil shot and prevent cancer. I mean, it was just that absolute. And I looked at that billboard and I go, how do they get away with making these statements of absolutism.
Mm-hmm.
Get your Gardasil and prevent cancer, when it's just absolutely not true.
It's not true. Right, and that's, in the greater good, again, there's a researcher that talked about how with cervical cancer, oftentimes it resolves itself, So,
Right.
and so, again, the body's healing itself. And so the risk of cervical cancer is actually so small to mass vaccinate and again, we could teach our daughters about abstinence or safe sex, and especially at such a young age.
Right.
And it's just, Gardasil has been an interesting vaccine in that because the kids are older, you can see the effects, where when the kids are younger and they lose their developmental skills, it's like, well, it could be this, it could be that. But now that they're older and these young girls are dying,
Right.
having paralysis, seizures, things like that. I had a patient tell me that her daughter, immediately after Gardasil shot, literally fell on the floor and started having a seizure, and immediately, wasn't later, immediately, and the doctor would not report it and said that she just passed out because she didn't like needles.
Right.
And it's like just an immediate response like that. So the older kids are actually showing us what some of these vaccines are doing, and it hasn't slowed anyone down yet,
Right.
but I hope that it will before too many more girls are damaged.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's not. There's just not a lot of. We have to look at science versus dogma, right? And for me, science means, okay, well, how do things naturally work?
Yes.
If I want to understand science, I'm going to look outside and study the grass and the trees and how does the human body work and how are we designed to work and how are we designed to interact on a natural basis, because
Yes.
obviously we came from the earth and the ground and everything that we have around us. So that to me is good science,
Yes.
just looking at fundamental laws of nature. And I think that's what science is. I don't think there would be many scientists that would disagree with those defining parameters, but in the world of the vaccine industry and big pharma, it's all about dogma, right? Because if you talk to pediatricians, as I've talked to some pediatricians before, and when I ask them about vaccinations, their response is typically, well, kids are healthier today because of it. And I said,
Yes.
well, but that's not true,
No.
right? We just talked about if we plotted graphs of infectious disease versus chronic disease, you'd see as infectious disease has come down and as more and more vaccines were introduced, there is a direct correlation with an increase in chronic illness.
Absolutely. Our kids are the sickest they've ever been. I
Yeah,
mean, right?
absolutely.
This is not chiropractors saying this. This is the AMA. This is saying this generation of children are not expected to outlive their parents. That's
Right.
the first time ever in history, and so it's just sad how sick we are, and how I know when my kids were little. It was painful for me to even go to play dates because
Right.
we would all be sitting in a circle and talking, and it was Johnny had another set of tubes, and Sarah had an asthma attack, and so it's like the kids were all the kids were sick, but it's so common now that it's just normal. It's like,
Right.
well, we're on this drug, that drug. Children will come in the office on 6 different medications,
Right.
and mom doesn't think a thing about it because, well, everyone else is sick, so it's just normal now.
Right. And I think on a side note, I mean, I don't want to get off our course too much, but it's a very confusing dynamic in the healthcare industry. So we have kids that are getting sicker, but yet we go back to a system that can't address the cause and the etiology of their sickness.
Absolutely.
Right? So you go back to the pediatrician, the medical doctor, and I'm not saying that arena is bad. What I'm saying is they're just not well positioned to deal with certain things.
Right. There's
Right.
a time and place, right? Like
Absolutely.
crisis care, absolutely. There's those times where it's absolutely necessary to get medicine, but if you want true wellness, true health, that doesn't come in a bottle. It doesn't come in a needle.
Yeah.
That's just not how the body works.
So what would you tell a parent? A parent comes up, obviously I know you've had this conversation, as have I, so doc, what do I do for my kids, to enhance and keep them healthy?
Again, I think that could be another whole webinar. We should put that in the calendar.
Right, because you're telling me don't vaccinate my kid, but there's poor diet, there's there's all this potential,
Right.
all right, for them to still become ill. So what is it? How do I position myself as a parent to best support my child and myself, right, to maintain health and well-being?
Right. Well, first and foremost, I think that it really is getting back to the basics, as we've touched on already, is that how does the body function, how does the body heal. You know, in our world, obviously, we're very educated and in tune with the nervous system, and it really is very simple and basic in that we all know the brain controls everything in the body, and the brain communicates with everything in the body through the nervous system. And so, you know, as chiropractors, we check for subluxation. We check to see, are there interferences to that nervous system? And that's first and foremost, I think, because it controls everything. So I tell parents all the time, you can have a perfectly clean diet, which what child has a perfectly clean diet? You know, I haven't met one, mine included. So it was a lot cleaner when they were younger. Sad. But anyway, so I lost a little control. But even if you have a perfectly clean diet, if the nervous system is interfered with, say, going to the lungs, then the lungs can't be healthy. You know, so making sure they have a properly functioning nervous system, and then supporting that with good nutrition, as you're mentioning, the whole foods, getting nursing, I mean, all of those things, and getting rid of the junk. It's not about being perfect. I tell patients all the time, it's not about being perfect. It's about making conscious choices. You know, I tried to be perfect when my kids were little, and I was a neurotic freak, and it wasn't healthy either. You know, so it's not about being perfect, but really just being conscious and aware, and that's
right. And I mean, you know, and kids are going to get sick. Adults are going to get sick.
And sickness is okay.
It is okay, right? I mean, part of it is, you know, the body, you know, we talk in the chiropractic arena, right, about our innate immune system, and our body just has the capacity, as does anything in the natural order, to be able to fight off and withstand, you know, really virtually anything, given a healthy immune system. So, you know, if you have a runny nose and a fever, 3, 4, 5 days, you may not feel great, but I think part of it is we don't want to go through that. I know as adults we're like, I don't have time to be sick. I don't have time to be down for 3, 4, 5 days. But unfortunately, what I tell my patients is, hey, you just gotta let your body do what it needs to do, support it in the best way possible, because you will, on the other side of it, it does strengthen your system, right?
Prevents cancer. I mean, it's,
absolutely.
You know, it's building your immune system, and that's the thing is, I understand that as a parent, your child's sick, you've got to miss work, etc. And so if we can just stop those symptoms, then we can go on about our day. But suppressing our body's ability to heal itself, like a fever, you know, parents don't understand that a fever is their body's way of cleansing itself, you know. So we don't want to just stop that fever. It's not throw your kid in the corner and be like, good luck, honey, you know, we'll check in later. You want to support that immune system, of course, keep a close eye on them, but if you can allow the fever to run its course, their immune system's stronger, it's cleansing, and that's how you get stronger and for lifelong.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
So that's really important.
So what would you tell, getting back to our vaccine conversation?
Yes, we did it.
What would you, I mean, so, you know, there's always that talk about, well, you know, I got vaccinated.
Right.
And I'm fine.
That's exactly, you know, we kind of touched on that earlier, like how the numbers have, you know, nearly tripled, and so that's number one. And again, even kids today, they're fine, right? I mean, the kids that are walking around with ear infections and asthma, and again, ADD is so prevalent, it's like, they're fine, but that's not what I want for my child. I don't want my child just to survive. I don't want my child just to be fine. And I want them to be able to express their full potential, whether it be emotionally or, you know, I mean, there are a lot of kids out there that are struggling due to vaccine injury and even diet and things like that. You know, if you're chemically toxic, how can you, you know, as parents or as an adult, I go to Starbucks and get I don't know the drinks, but like caramel macchiato is something I hear all the time. So I get some big drink. I want to be all sugared up and caffeinated. How I could never go sit down and focus, but that's what we're expecting from our children, you know. So I'm getting off topic again.
Well,
so let's get back to vaccines.
That's a good point. Well, I think the distinction I said is, well, so what do you mean you're fine? Does that mean you don't have symptoms?
Right.
And so I don't.
Or acceptable symptoms, because everyone else has them, so it must be normal.
I mean, we've gotten so used to the child that's just got a wet, hacky cough, or the thick, you know, nasally discharge, you know, snot just come out. We almost disregard it anymore. We don't even think, oh, well, you know, that's just normal.
That's Johnny.
He's like that all the time, you know.
Right.
You know, it lasts for 2, 3, or 4 weeks. And so even the people that say, well, I got vaccinated, I'm fine, I'm like, well, what does that mean, and how do we define it?
Right.
And how do you know?
Right.
Because chronic illness develops over a long period of time. We don't see it tomorrow or in a week or 2 weeks, but we might see it in 5, 10, 15, or 20 years. Cancer, right? Cancer can grow for 15, 20 years before it ever becomes symptomatic. Heart disease, the leading cause of death in the United States, can be present for years and years before you ever actually have a heart attack.
Right, absolutely. And that's the thing, is that again, you look at how many teens are dealing with cancer, and it's tragic, and it's frustrating because it's, you know, it is devastating. I can't even imagine going through that. But it's not random. You know, it happened for a reason. And so getting back to what caused that and how can we prevent that from happening to another child, to another teen, etc. Yeah, it's something that we have to look at. Our kids, you know, my biggest complaint about vaccines is, well, first, you know, when we talk about the media, is that all of these conversations are happening based on the information that vaccines are safe, that, you know, everyone should be vaccinated. No one mentions one thing, including most pediatricians in our town anyway, that there's any risk. It's just, it's safe, the blinders are on, it's safe, it's safe, it's safe, it's safe. It's like, show me the research.
So, well, that's a good point. So if I said, hey doc, you know, if I go and I spent 2 days combing through the internet for valid research, am I gonna find anything that says, oh yeah, absolutely, this is a well-based, solidly conducted scientific study that says absolutely vaccines are safe?
No.
Are we going to find anything like that?
I have not found it.
Yeah,
and I'm not the only one that's looked, you know. I put that challenge out to anyone that's ever come to a workshop. There's researchers, experts, you know, whole associations that are looking for this research. And unfortunately, many moms who have, and dads, who have had children be injured by vaccines, and when they go to search for the research, it's not there. Or, you know, of course they find the contrary. So there's no long-term study done or large study done that compare vaccinated to unvaccinated children, which, why not? You know, that's crazy. If they're so safe, then why not do that study? The studies that have been done are, they'll use the adjuvant. So most people understand the placebo, right? So you have the 2 studies, and what they'll do is, for these smaller groups that they have done studies on, one group will get the vaccine, the placebo group will actually get the adjuvant, which is the aluminum hydroxide, the mercury, those kinds of things, which are what people are concerned about. So there is no placebo. There's no good study done that shows, yes, they're safe. And that's, and again, I think if you look at our kids today, you can see that's the answer.
I think I'm pretty sure 99% of the vaccines come with a pretty clear explanation of the side effects, right? Which the most predominant side effect is neurological.
Absolutely.
Right? So, and obviously for those of you who don't know that term, neurological, right? It affects the brain and the nervous system. Those are the most potent. And we know aluminum, again, you can talk to any scientist and they'll tell you, yep, aluminum is toxic it causes neuronal death.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's plain. It's simple.
It is very plain and simple.
Neuron death.
But yet, if you talk to vaccine manufacturers, oh no, it's safe.
Right.
We're exposed to it every day.
Yeah. It's not connected at
Right.
all.
So, you know, I tell parents, so in a joking fashion, I'm like, so if I came up and I you know, had a teaspoon of antifreeze and I said, oh no, I'm just gonna give your kid just a little teaspoon of antifreeze. What parent?
Keep them safe.
Yeah,
and
right.
protect them.
It's totally safe. What parent is gonna, or individual is gonna say, oh, I absolutely got it.
Right.
No problem.
Right.
But that's what we've elevated that portion of that of the medical world up on such a high pedestal that you know it can do no wrong.
It's interesting because so many people that I talk to, they don't trust our government. They don't trust our pharmaceutical companies on every other topic.
That's
you know, they know that they've seen, you know, if you ever turn on the TV, you see that this drug was pulled off the shelf, this drug. Well, all those drugs were approved by the FDA to begin with and then recalled. And so people get that. They understand that pharmaceutical companies, you know, I mean, they'll say, oh, it's big money, can't be trusted, can't trust our government. You bring up the vaccine topic. Well, no, I mean, it's safe. Well, so you don't trust them on all of these other topics, but again, blinders go on with vaccines. It's really the most interesting thing. I mean, it's just astounding.
Sometimes
honestly.
you just want to beat your head against the wall because even if you can't, even when you use logistics and when you bring to the table good science, it's just completely neglected.
Right. It really is, especially recently, with all the media going on. There, several conversations, it's like you cannot have a rational conversation because
Right.
it's so heated and so emotional, and but not based on fact. And that's the thing that I always like to mention, and this usually will stop someone for a moment anyway, in that if most people don't realize that in 1986 a law was passed by Congress that vaccine manufacturers could not be sued. So if your child has a vaccine and is injured in any way, dies, has permanent disability, etc., you cannot sue the manufacturer.
Right.
So there's no liability. And so there's no other industry on the planet that has that protection from our government. Why? If they're so safe, we're just supposed to blindly trust. Don't ask a question. Don't ask what's in a vaccine. Just trust us.
Yeah.
It's safe. Then why in the world would they need this liability from our government?
Right. Right.
I mean, that just speaks volumes, right?
I agree. Well, and then let's look at, we're talking about facts, right? So how much money has been awarded,
Yes.
right, through the compensatory programs for vaccine-injured children?
Right. So because you cannot sue the manufacturer, they set up their own vaccine court. So
Right.
when you get a vaccine or your child gets a vaccine, you pay. There's a bug in here.
Oh.
That's exciting. Spring's coming. Okay. So they set up their own vaccine court, and so when you get a vaccine, you pay a tax, and that money goes to this for compensation. And the last number I read was over $2.7 billion has been paid out to parents of children that have been injured. So that's not just a little penny in the bucket. That's $2.7 billion have been
Right.
paid out. So, and let's be honest, how many children have been injured that never went to court? The FDA had done a study and showed that only 1 in 10 adverse events are even reported. So
Right.
even if your doctor came to you and said, here are the numbers, which that never happens, but if it did, if your doctor said, here are the numbers, here's your protection, here's your risk, and gave you a number, your risk of getting brain damage or death is this number. The FDA says that's 90% wrong. Only 1 in 10 adverse events are reported. So we have no idea of the numbers. We don't. We're just supposed to blindly trust.
Right. So I have this question asked from patients a lot. What if a parent chooses? Well, okay, I'm gonna do some of the vaccinations, or some, but not all. Can I still utilize the exemption based on my state allowances? Can I still utilize religious or philosophical exemptions, even if I still want to do some of the vaccines and not all of them?
It is definitely trickier, and in the past that has been okay. I think the time has come that it's gonna get so much more strict.
Right.
But before you could kind of just put the form in and it would be fine. But it does make it really comes down to why. You just have to say, why do you have those beliefs?
Right.
And I think as a parent we should be asking those questions anyway, because are your beliefs based on fact? So again, why are you choosing, say, my children's pediatrician when they were bitty babies said, I don't care if you do any other vaccines. He was an older doctor. I don't care if you do any of the vaccines. Honestly, he was like, I don't think they're necessary, but you need to do the polio shot. And so in his mind, polio was he had seen polio. He was old
Sure.
enough that he'd seen polio, so that was the one he was afraid of. And so that was his belief system, and that was fine. And that but as a parent, why are you making those decisions? Why are you saying, well, I'm comfortable with this one and not that one? So well,
Sure.
and then write that in your letter. For religious exemption, which is what we can use in Illinois as religious or medical, it just has to be, what is your belief system? Why do you feel that way? Which really you should come to terms with anyway, and know
Sure.
very strongly, okay, well, why am I comfortable with this? And do you know the ingredients in each one? Is that why you made your decision? Or are you, for me personally, I'm not afraid of the measles. I'm not afraid of whooping cough. Do I want my child to get whooping cough? No.
Right.
but I'm not afraid of it. But I'm much more afraid of what are in the vaccines. So as a parent, that's what you have to look at. Have you done the research on each vaccine? What's in it? Then did you research those ingredients to see, like we talked about, the aluminum hydroxide causing neuron death, etc. And that's what you could put in your letter.
Right. And and with the bill that we had mentioned at the beginning, that would also, it not only would probably more than likely eliminate religious exemption, but it would also severely restrict medical exemptions.
Right.
So we don't even know what parameters they would use.
Absolutely.
The likelihood is they'd be like, well, no, that doesn't meet medical criteria, so
Right.
they're going to make all these rules that aren't really rules, but they'll make them up as they go.
Right.
Because that's how we
they
see a
can.
lot of things
Yes,
done,
yes.
right?
Well, and that's, I've talked to many medical doctors and parents, of course, that I have parents in my practice that their child was injured by a vaccine. They go back to the same pediatrician that injured their child with the vaccine, and they won't give them a medical exemption. They won't do it. It's like, what is more reason to give a medical exemption than the child had a vaccine, and
Right.
One individual that comes to mind, this young girl couldn't wear clothes for 6 weeks because she was so hypersensitive. Like, what's more of a reason to give a medical exemption? I can't think of any. So,
Right.
and I talked to another pediatrician just recently who's fine with not vaccinating, and she's scared for herself, for her license, for her practice, because she said, if I'm writing out medical exemptions all day long, they'll take my license.
Right.
So it's like they're putting them in such a position that doctors are scared to death to write a medical exemption. If you're a pediatrician, my understanding, and I'm not going to get the exact number right, maybe you know this, the American Academy of Pediatrics, if you're in that organization, so if you're a pediatrician versus like a family practitioner, you have to have, forgive me, it's either 70% or 90% vaccination rate in your practice.
Oh, really? No, I didn't
or
know that.
you, yes, or you can get in trouble with the
Wow.
the
Well, and
organization.
I know a lot of pediatricians that if patients come to them and say, I'm not getting vaccinated, they're like, well, you can't be part of my practice. And I think we get into a whole nother realm of morals and ethics in practice, because it's contradictory, right? As doctors, right? We are bound to do what we feel is in the best interest of the patient. So if a patient comes to you seeking care, and based on your dogma, you decide not to accept them as patients, is that not contradicting your moral and ethical obligation to serve your community, but more importantly, serve that family, serve that patient?
Right, absolutely. Well, and again, it comes down to, I think I don't believe for 1 second that there's any pediatrician in our town or any other town that's out to harm children.
Absolutely.
I don't believe that. I do absolutely think that, as a rule, they don't know the ingredients. They haven't done a tenth of the research, that many parents do. And so they don't have the information, they just have the blinders on. They're safe, absolutely necessary, and that's what they believe. So, but that being said, again, many of these pediatricians are in businesses. It's not, they don't own their own private practice.
Sure.
And so they have their authority saying you must have this percentage of vaccination. You've got the American Academy of Pediatrics saying you must have this percentage. And a pediatrician just told one of my patients the other day, again, vaccine injured child, that he saw it happen, and he said, I can't see your family much longer because this is really affecting my bonus. And I thought,
oh my,
wow,
Yeah.
I had the belief that was there, but to so boldly say, you're affecting my bonus, I thought, wow, that's interesting. So, which I understand, pediatricians, just like everyone else, are in business, they have to feed their families, but to just, it was amazing to me. So.
Yeah, and one of the things that I know concerns both of us, and again, I think there's enough, if you can ask enough questions and raise enough flags about anything, then I think it's cause for you to stop, do your research, ask appropriate questions, search out appropriate resources. There's lots of resources, guys, books, videos. Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, I know, is a great resource. Within her own profession, obviously, she's been extricated, an outcast, right, because she doesn't conform to the ethics and beliefs of which they want her to. But for me, a question is, so you have a baby, a newborn, getting a vaccine. But is there any dosage regulation for the newborn baby who's getting vaccinated, and then the 5-year-old
Right.
that's getting vaccinated? Are they getting the same amounts? What are the effects? Right, I mean, we have different sized people here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Race, gender, size. A 4-pound newborn gets the same vaccine that a 9-pound newborn gets. We don't do that in any other, medicine. They're gonna give you a different dosage than me. And
Sure.
even just the basic pill. We all know that you and I can take the same medicine and it's gonna act differently in your body than mine. That's why there's side effects and things like that. Like, we don't know how that newborn baby is gonna react. And again, even if we know how they're gonna react to that one shot, what's gonna happen at 2 months when they get more shots? And and these shots have these adjuvants in them to keep it in the body. So the chemicals are just accumulating,
Right.
and that's of course why we have chronic illness, in my opinion. But
And obviously, in nature, we're not going to be exposed to an attenuated form,
no,
right? We're going to get the full-on form,
right,
so which is going to change our immune response.
right, and the pathway, exactly. Like, we come in contact with vira bacteria through a certain pathway, through our nose, through our mouth, not injected into our body.
Right.
Where it's driven deep into the body, and we can't even have the proper immune response. So just honestly, when you really get to the very simple basics, it doesn't make sense. And that's what I want for parents. I'm not here to say don't vaccinate. I'm saying don't blindly vaccinate. Like,
Right.
look at what is in the vaccine and just educate yourself first.
Absolutely. And there's
Educate first.
any other resources that you want to
Gosh,
mention
there's
to our
so
listeners?
many. I think NVIC is the best.
Okay.
They're as far as your rights and things like that. The CDC actually, if you can get past the craziness of it's safe, everyone should be vaccinated. But if you really, they have all the inserts there, so you can get the inserts and look at the ingredients and do your own research. There's side effects on those inserts that, again, no one's reading. So that's another good resource. I'm trying to think. Dr. Mayer Eisenstein, who actually recently passed away, but he was a great resource. I have a website that I just recently started called thevoiceforchoice.com, and that has got, I have this young woman who has helped me. She's much more organized than I am. And so she has placed article after article, study after study, that shows what we've been talking about here today. So that's another great resource. She's blown me away at what she's been able to do with this website. So that's great. I'm sure there's 17 more I could list.
Right.
But
Well, I think it's just important for people. I think we want our listeners to understand that, hey, we're just asking questions, guys.
absolutely.
Right. We don't. You can say you're anti. You can say you're pro. I know that our position is just become informed.
Absolutely.
When you become informed, when you see the basis for which they promote all these vaccines, I guarantee you're going to have way more questions than we just brought to the table tonight.
It is. We know it's scary, and we know it's, to go against the norm. I have parents call me all the time. They've been bullied by their pediatrician.
Right.
They're in tears, because the pediatrician is flat out mean to them, and it is scary. There's nothing scarier than what do I do with my child? But it is just making that informed decision, and that's why we're here. So don't ever feel like you're alone. You can contact us anytime.
Absolutely.
Because it is. I have parents tell me all the time. In fact, I made up this little card that I can make available to everyone. I don't even know if I've shared it with you yet or not. I had a little card made up, and it's just a card that moms or dads can, stick in their purse or car or whatever. And it just is like the bullet points of like, this is why many parents don't vaccinate. Because moms told me, I talk with you, it makes perfect sense in my mind, there's no question, there's no way I'm vaccinating, and then my mother-in-law starts grilling me, or I'm at a play date and they start grilling me, and they're like, I just lose everything, so it's just like, I made up these little bullet points of like, and some will apply and some won't, not everybody may agree with everything, but it's just kind of an idea of
Right.
what to look at, what to question.
Right. Well, hopefully we've given you some great information and given you some good resources with which to pursue. And anything else you want to add, Doc?
I'm good.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed being here.
Yes, this is exciting. So we'll give you some information on a website to follow up with us if you have questions. We're both on Facebook. That's about all I know. Are you like a Twitter guy and a?
No, I'm not.
Yeah, that's because we're old. That's because we're old. We need to work on that. All right. Well, have a good night. Thank you so much.